Good morning. Today is the 25th day of Iyar, the 2nd of June. And we're starting not just a new Torah portion, but a whole new book of the Pentateuch, the book that in English is called the Book of Numbers, but in Hebrew is called Bamidbar, the way that we always said it, which means in the wilderness. And in it we hear about different events and that have to do, one would say, with the formation of the people. There are many events that have to do with organizing them in the encampment, censuses that were taken, the rebellion of Korach and his cohorts, and towards the end of the book, in Parshat Chukat, we skip over 38 years, and we come to the end of the time in the wilderness. That's why this book is called the wilderness, or the desert, the wilderness, because really it tells us of everything that happened in terms of events, and everything that happened during the 40 years in the wilderness. So, in the fourth parsha we read about the sin of the spies. Then we have Korach and his people. Then we skip 38 years, and we end up on the eve of their entrance into the land of Canaan, and the events that happen and ensue in that respect, the curses of Balak and Balaam and their attempts to curse the people, and then the war against Midian, the special arrangement that was made with some of the nations in the south of the land of Canaan. And then finally we end with a recap in Parsha Masei, the final portion of everything, all the different places that they had visited on their journey through the wilderness to the land of Canaan. So this book of the Pentateuch spans really the whole 40 years, the entire 40 years. And this includes, like we said, the formation of the people around these events of these 40 years, how they became more and more into a unified, coherent people. There's a lot to be said about that, but we want to focus today on just this idea of why is one of the books of the Torah called in the wilderness. Bamidbar literally means in the wilderness. So we know that the Torah was given on Mount Sinai, but that's not exactly how we understand it. We understand that Mount Sinai was just a location. Really the point was to give the Torah in the wilderness. And we always read this parsha before Shavuot, before the Feast of Weeks, when we commemorate the giving of the Torah. So there's a very strong link of having this parsha Bamidbar in the wilderness and the giving of the Torah. And there's a powerful medrash that reads, that asks the question of why did God choose to give the Torah in the wilderness. This is a very big motif in Torah learning, in Jewish life, that the Torah was not given in the land of Canaan. It wasn't given in the land of Israel. It was given outside. Now, if you follow my Patreon, we just had a class that discussed about how difficult this is to understand, especially for secular scholars, which is why they apparently have to discard the whole description. I don't want to get into it now, but just understand that this is a very important motif, that the Torah was given in the wilderness, not in the land of Canaan, in the land of Israel. So the Medrash says like this. He compares the decision to give the Torah in the wilderness to a king who entered the country. And he's looking for a place to set up his palace, to set up his dwelling place. So he entered the country, and the locals saw him and fled. He entered the second country, and they also fled from him. Then he entered the desolate city, and there they praised him. The king said, "This city is better than all the countries. Here I will build my palace and reside here." I think there's a mistake here in the translation. It's not that he said, I will enter into a country. The person who translated this didn't know. In Hebrew, country, Medina, really not even country, more like state, is actually the ancient word from, if you know from the book of Esther, the scroll of Esther, Medina means a city. So actually he entered one city, the locals saw him and fled. He entered a second city, and they also fled from him. Finally he entered what seemed to be a desolate city, and there, meaning it was very poor, and not the place he would naturally have set up his palace, and that's where they praise him, and he chooses to build his palace there. So, the idea here, says the Medrash, is similarly, when God approached the sea to give the Torah there, the sea fled from him. When he revealed himself on Mount Sinai, the mountains trembled, as stated, the mountains danced like rams. When he came to the desolate desert, the wilderness, it welcomed him and celebrated him, as it is written, let the desert and its dwellings cry aloud. This is a verse from Isaiah 42. Thus God said, this desert, this wilderness is better than all my lands. Here I will build my dwelling. Now, what do we mean that the sea fled, the mountains fled? What's the idea here? The idea would seem to be that they understand that this is a great thing to have God within you, so they're afraid of it. It's something that's too great for them to hold the revelation of God. And indeed, the Alter Rebbe says that the desert represents nullification. That's what's special about it. This desolate city where the people are poor, they have self-nullification. And the main toil of learning Torah, why was the Torah given in the wilderness? To teach us that the main toil is to gain a state of complete nullification before the blessed light of the infinite. When we learn Torah, we should be in a state of self-nullification, to be as receptors. If you remember from last week, we talked about the verse that says 10 women will bake their bread in one oven, and we said that the 10 women here represent the 10 faculties of the soul, according to the Alter Rebbe, and bake their bread means learn Torah. A person should learn Torah with the 10 faculties of his soul in a feminine state. The feminine state is one where one is nullified, where one is willing to receive. And he's not learning in order to accomplish. He's not learning the Torah in order to mark or make a mark that he's already achieved all this and he's learned all that and he's succeeded so and so in his studies. That is the direction that the Alter Rebbe takes, and it's the common direction in Chabad thinking. Reb Simcha Bunim of Pshischa says it a little bit differently, and I think his understanding of the Medrash is enlightening. He says this Medrash is wondrous. What do we mean that the sea fled and that the mountains shook? So what? Why is that a problem? So he says like this: everything that's in this Medrash is talking about the miracles that God performed. And the purpose of these miracles was to help us recognize and know that He is the Creator, He's above nature. That's the purpose of a miracle. So the parting of the Red Sea, which is what the sea here represents, was a tremendous miracle. But you have to understand the miracles only have so much impact. A miracle is eventually forgotten. What do we mean it's forgotten? The event itself might be remembered, but we don't have the capacity to live it over and over again, especially after one generation passes that didn't see it. So then the miracle becomes hearsay. And, the biggest problem that we have today is that people read the Torah, they read the Bible. They can either believe the miracles or not believe them. There's only, some people believe it, some people don't. But the whole purpose of the miracles was not to show that God is just powerful, was to connect us to Him as the one who controls the world. The person who sees the miracle, at that moment he's awakened with tremendous longing for God. But even the person who sees it, after time, forgets that feeling. And miracles die down, their impact dies down just like everything else in life. It was one of the most important moments in my life when I read in the Alter Rebbe, and the founder of Chabad, He writes, if God would appear to you right now at this moment with all his hosts, you would be impressed for a moment. And for a moment you would say, I will never do anything wrong again. I will live my life dedicated to holiness and to goodness. But then over time, even though you saw it, even though you experienced it, that experience will fade. And you won't be able to enliven it. You won't be able to live by it. So says Reb Bunim, what does it mean that he he didn't want to bring the Torah at the sea or at the mountain? Because he knew that this would not have a lasting impact. So what did he have to do? How can he ensure that this wilderness is better than any other cities? Here I will build my dwelling, because the whole point is that when one is a wilderness, learning Torah in such a way that he wants to grasp the infinite light of God, then that is what allows God to build a dwelling place in us. Only when we approach the Torah that way, and we engage in the Torah in that way, seeking to be a wilderness that will be God's dwelling place, only then do we truly encounter the infinite light, the infinite revelation of God. So that's the way that Simcha Bunim of Shischa explains this. Now there's something that has to be added, because even though the Torah, as we said, was given outside the land of Israel, its purpose was to be followed and safeguarded and kept in the land of Israel. That's what the Torah talks about all the time. There's hundreds of commandments that can only be performed in the land of Israel. So even though the Torah was given in the desert, in the wilderness, it has an intrinsic connection to the land of Israel. And so we have this, we'll end with this because there's a lot more to be said about it. I encourage you to look at the article that'll go up on Patreon by the end of the next couple of hours. And there we'll go into it a little bit more. The sages say that there is no Torah like the Torah of the land of Israel. What do they mean? They mean that in the land of Israel, there's a special quality that allows us to capture this essence of godliness in the Torah better than it can be done anywhere else. Why is this? Because they tell us the air of the land of Israel makes one wise. What do we mean makes one wise? Does your IQ go up? So we understand that wisdom is the external aspect. It's the sphera of wisdom whose inner experience is one of self-nullification. When a person is in a state of being in the land of Israel, he's in a state of self-nullification that allows him to capture, to cognitively capture, not just the content of the Torah, but rather, again, not just the story, not just the, call it the words on the outside, the external meaning of the words, but rather be able to create through these words his bond, his connection, his covenant with God. That's why it's so essential to constantly learn Torah. Without learning Torah, as much as a person will come and say, I have a connection, I understand my connection, it's not that way. To really have a experience, to really have a sense that God is with me at this moment, that I am in a dialogue with Him, a person has to engage in Torah, and like in the land of Israel, from a state of self-nullification, from a state of wisdom. And there's a beautiful gematria here that's, let's just mention one more thing. I didn't want to mention this, but we have to. The place where this is best enacted, the place where you can best capture the self-nullification is in the temple. Why? Because the temple is called Zion. It's its actual name. Sometimes we call it a temple. Sometimes we say Zion. We just say Zion. Sometimes Zion means the entire city of Jerusalem. Sometimes it just means a temple. This word, Zion, literally means dryness and desolation. Tziyah u'shmama. Tziyah is the root of Tzion. A lot of people think Zion means like a city, but really what it means is a desolate place. It's like this, exactly this desolate city that God came to and saw that this is where I want to make my dwelling place. When you come to the temple, one of the things about the temple that will strike you is that it is entirely not a place of dwelling for humans. There's no grass, there's no living creatures, it's not a natural place. It's not like you try to make it like so many temples were in the middle of nature. It's actually completely devoid of nature. You're not allowed to plant anything in the temple. Why is this so? Because it's trying to give you that same sense that for you to become a dwelling place for God, you also have to feel to some extent that you are desolate. Desolate in the sense of thirsty, in the sense of needy, in the sense of, like we said, the feminine aspect. That's not coming to conquer the relationship, but is rather coming to accept the relationship, to accept the need for this relationship. And a very beautiful gematria for this is that when we add Midbar, wilderness, to Jerusalem, the place of the temple, these two words together equal the land of Israel. The land of Israel is when you are able to discover the wilderness within Jerusalem. Meaning that every person, even if they don't currently live in the land of Israel, they can have the sense of being in the land of Israel when they're able to unify these two things together. To have a sense of Jerusalem together with the wilderness within it. The wilderness within it is, of course, as we said, the temple. Thank you very much for joining. Hope to see you tomorrow on Monday. All the best.